So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am Takeda King-Pang, the Executive Director of the Women's Foundation of Florida. We are excited to be offering this Florida Sales and Use Tax Workshop in partnership with the SCORE mentors of the Treasure Coast. And with that, I will turn over, just to let everyone know we are recording. Feel free to appear however you are most comfortable, and the recording will be available to all participants after the program. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Cheryl Leeper.
All right, well, thanks, Takeda. So welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you on our workshop tonight. This is the second one that we're doing in October with the Women's Foundation, and we've got another 2 sessions lined up for the end of the month. Very excited about those. It is business planning, and it is a 2-night working session for those of you who are business owners or thinking about becoming a business owner. It's an absolute fabulous workshop because we intend to actually be working with each one of the participants and helping them draft and complete their business plan by the end of that 2-night session. So I hope that you will join us if that is something that you are needing right now for your business. I'm very pleased to be introducing Frank tonight. He is a SCORE mentor. He's been with SCORE for 12 years now, I think. Frank, you've been
12 or 13 years. It's been a long time.
Yeah, and he is absolutely a resident expert on Florida sales, use, tax, and use. I can't ever say that. Why can I not get that right, Frank? What is
don't pay
sales and use tax, right? Okay, that's how it is. Anyway, couple of things. If you have questions, and we have more people joining, Frank, so there's more people coming on. So maybe after you do your introduction, we'll have them speak up and tell us what they're doing, what their business plans are. Then during the presentation, Frank likes to be interrupted and he's great at answering questions. So please put your questions in the chat box. And when Frank takes a breath, then we'll get in there and we'll ask him the questions. So I'm turning it over to you now, Frank.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Frank Titikus. My background primarily is healthcare. And however, I've been involved. I started off being involved in hospitals, came down to Florida and built a medical center down at Delray, and then ran a Florida region for a while, and then the Eastern Division, and then ultimately got involved in other healthcare businesses. And my wife and I had a few businesses along the side, retail businesses, imaging centers, things along those lines. So I've certainly paid enough taxes. I figured I better learn about it. And particularly after the Florida Department of Revenue came after me one time because I hadn't been filing frequently enough for reporting. Fortunately, they didn't lock me up. But at any rate, I see, and I'd just like to ask Shakima and Janelle to let me know what type of businesses you all are in, so that I can be a little more specific in the presentation. I'll start with you, Janelle. What type of business are you in?
Hi, Frank. I'm in real estate. I work in healthcare, but my business is in real estate.
Okay. And how about Shakima? What type of business are you in?
I'm in the business of helping people, so I don't know how that would translate, but I have a registered nonprofit corporation and a registered for-profit corporation.
Okay. And the for-profit corporation, what type of help do you provide?
It's community-based, but I don't really, how can I say, generate like income in a sense. I guess it's like donation based for right now till I figure that piece out. Like, how do I market myself to charge people that can't really afford to pay much already as it is because of the demographic that I work with. But a lot of the stuff is donated or in kind and stuff like that. So I assist, like this summer I did a summit where I assist youths to become employable, and about 4 of them were able to get jobs. So that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with me. Well, let's see we'll go through the presentation. And as Cheryl said earlier, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to stop and ask, and I'll try and answer them as we go along. So we're going to just, as you know, this is where the foundation is in concert with SCORE, and SCORE covers Indian River, St. Lucie, Martin, Okeechobee, and Glades County. And we've been around for about 40 years, and we service a lot of people. My contact information is here, and I'm assuming that Takeda is going to
Can
email
you
this.
share your screen?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing that.
No problem.
I apologize. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. I thought once I clicked on it, I thought I was sharing it. My apologies. And at any rate, this is my contact information is in here. And so I'm assuming Takeda is going to email this out to everybody. And feel free to contact me if you have any questions after that come up, while you're thinking about it. I usually get a lot of revelations about 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll think of, something. And so if it comes up afterwards, don't hesitate to shoot me an email and I'll get back to you. We're going to go over as Cheryl said, sales and use tax in the state of Florida. I think it's pretty interesting that the Department of Revenue, they administer over 30 tax types of taxes in the state of Florida. But today we're going to focus on the sales and use tax. And sales tax, oh, I told you I was fat-fingered. Sales tax, which I think is interesting, is a tax on the privilege of engaging in business. And because you have the privilege of going into business, the government then has the privilege of reaching its hand in your pocket and taking part of what the transaction was. And so the sales tax is really a transaction tax. Use tax is a tax on a right to consume or use something in the state of Florida. And we'll get into that in more detail in terms of how use tax comes into play versus sales tax. So sales tax applies to about 7 different categories. One of them is tax on tangible personal property. And I think we're all pretty familiar with this. You go into a store, you turn around and you buy something, and there's a tax added onto it. Transient rentals is another one. If you have property that you're renting out to somebody, or you're staying in a hotel or a motel, there is a tax that is put onto the rental of that room or the rental of the property. Commercial rentals also pay a sales tax. And we'll go into each one of these in a little more depth. Admissions is also taxed. There are some services that are taxed, but generally in the state of Florida, services are not taxed. And then service warranties are also taxed, and amusement machines are taxed. So
It's 6:45.
I'm sorry, that's my computer, and I turn this on. I don't know how to turn it off. So you're going to have to bear with me every 15 minutes. So let's talk about the personal property, okay? Retail goods are taxed. Prepared food and meals are taxed, and furniture and clothing are taxed. So an example of prepared foods and meals, you go into a restaurant, you're going to pay a sales tax at the time that, when you finish and you're presented with the bill. If you go into Publix and you buy certain food items that you're going to prepare at home, they're not taxed. However, if you go to the deli counter and you buy a sandwich, or you go to where they have a vat of soup and you take a bowl of soup, you're going to pay sales tax on those because they've been prepared. And, the state of Florida thinks, and rightfully so, that we have to eat. And if you aren't eating and you aren't going to live, then you can't pay tax in the future. So they don't tax that. However, you don't have to go to a restaurant and you don't have to buy prepared food. Let's talk about transient rentals. as I mentioned, hotels, motels, they're all taxed. Condominium units, vacation houses, campgrounds, and RV park. Also, storage facilities are taxed. However, if you are renting something for more than 6 months, you don't have to pay, like you have a condo that you're renting out or you have a house that you're renting out. If it's a long-term rental, there is no sales tax involved in that. If it's less than 6 months, there is sales tax involved and you need to collect sales tax. That's just.
Frank, I thought that businesses, oh, never mind. There you go.
No, go ahead,
Oh,
fire
I was just
away.
gonna say, when you said the short-term rentals, and I was like, I thought businesses had to pay taxes no matter if it was short or long-term.
Well, that's commercial real estate. You just sped right into it, Takita. Thank you very much. Commercial rentals, yes, you have to pay a sales tax. Now, usually, if you're renting a piece of property or you're renting an office or a storefront or something like that, you're usually going to, and I've got a couple of real estate people here, Deanna and Janelle, you're going to run into a triple net lease whereby you have the lease for what you're paying per square footage. Then you have the add-ons and you add a common area maintenance. And you also have the taxes on that piece of property that are apportioned to your section of the lease. And we'll talk about this a little bit more because what do you call it? The landlord utilizes a reseller certificate and lets the state know that he's not responsible for paying, or she's not responsible for paying the tax. And they're using a reseller certificate, but they're passing it on to the tenants. So you're right, commercial properties are subject to a tax. Admissions, games, sporting events, amusement parks, movies, they all have a tax. Interestingly enough, though, the state of Florida requires that if you're collecting tax, you have to show it as a line item. The only exceptions to showing it as a line item are admissions. And you'll never see it on a movie theater ticket. You're not going to see it when you go to Disney World and you pay whatever they're charging, for the day or for your park hopper pass. It is just the price is on there and it's buried into the price. And that's the only exception for not showing something on a line item basis. I don't know how that came about. Obviously, somebody had a pretty good lobbyist, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was Walt back in the 70s. There are certain services, and generally, services are exempt from sales tax. If you're providing a service, and Shakima, if you're providing a service to a client and you're not selling any goods, then you normally don't have to collect taxes. However, if you have a cleaning business and you're cleaning homes, you don't collect the tax. If you're cleaning an office building, you're obligated to collect the tax at that point in time. Pest control is another non-residential pest control. So if it's commercial pest control, you have, one of the pest control companies come out to your house. They don't charge you a tax. If you have them come to your place of business, your office or your store, you're going to have to pay a sales tax on the pest control services. And also security services, detective or burglar protection services, there's a tax on those. So if you have one of the companies has an alarm system and they're monitoring your home, you're going to pay a sales tax on that transaction.
Frank, before you move forward, Diana has a question about transient rentals. Diana, if you want to just unmute yourself, you can ask.
Yeah, sorry about that. So, for example, if I'm set up with, those online platforms where I can put my listing for a transient rental, they're collecting the sales tax on my behalf, correct?
Well, I don't know. All right, who's the client paying? Are they paying you or are they paying the company?
They pay the third-party company, and then the third-party company deposits a difference to me.
Okay, and so the third-party company is not paying the tax. Did you have to provide a reseller certificate to the third-party company?
No, they do ask for a business license, and in some cases, you know, like a landlord permit, but they've never asked for a reseller cert.
Okay, when you file with the state, are you, how are you classifying the revenue from that business as taxable or non-taxable?
Well, taxable because it's a tourism tax if it's less than the 6 months. So I, you know, bake in the 11% tax to the night stay, but that's different than a sales tax.
You're absolutely right. It is different. And so say, and let's just use a hypothetical. Say you're collecting $100 for a stay, okay, whatever, and doesn't matter the length of the stay. And you're collecting that $100 and it's, you know, there should be a 6% tax on that. So you know, there should be $106 collected from whoever is receiving that service. The company is providing you with the $100 less their fee, I'm assuming. So say they take 10% off the top. Are they giving you $90 or $96?
I believe they're giving me $90.
Okay, what are they doing with the $6?
I believe they're paying the state for the tax.
Well, I would suggest that you ask them the question because you're ultimately responsible for that tax, not the country, not the company that you've contracted with. And you know, you're either a reseller, as is a, say, a landlord that is renting out somebody who's renting out property to another party that's collecting the tax, and in which case they should be requesting a reseller certificate from you so that you can put down on your sales tax form that that money is not taxable and that company X that you're doing business with is paying that tax. Does that make sense to you? Was I as clear as mud or not?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think what happened is specifically like with Airbnb, I think part of the reason some cities weren't liking the business model is because nobody was paying their taxes. So now Airbnb is set up with some cities that they'll collect the tax, but the homeowner has to show that they have a business permit. And that
Correct.
way they're able to match up, you know, the tax with the business permit. And then the owner has to then remit the tourist tax.
Okay.
I think that's.
So
how that works.
Airbnb theoretically should be providing or paying to the state of Florida the sales tax. You just need to verify that that's happening. And somewhere in the accounting statement that you get from Airbnb, you know, they ought to be able to show you that that's occurring, since these are transient short-term rentals.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right.
You were at security services, yeah.
Okay. Security services, as I said, those are taxable. And you're going to find out that, you know, that you look at something and you say, well, okay, why are security services taxable yet something else is not taxable, since this is in essence a service? Or why the difference between commercial versus residential? One could be, you know, how difficult it is to collect a tax and to monitor it because you want as high a compliance as possible. And the other, frankly, is just basically lobbying. I mean, Cheryl's up in Tallahassee today, and it's you can't walk a block without tripping over a lobbyist. If you go into Clyde's up there at night, you're going to turn around, and particularly at 5 o'clock, you're going to see a bar full of lobbyists hanging out in Clyde's. At any rate, the service warranties are also taxable. And so, for example, my wife and I have a service warranty on the appliances in our house and also in our daughter's home, and that is a taxable event. So not only normally a service isn't, but yet at the same time, the service warranty is taxable. Amusement machines, the arcades that you may see in a strip center or you see in the mall, they are all taxed, and they're taxed in a little bit different way from the standpoint that there is a flat tax per machine. It's $30 per machine. And then they take 4% of the gross. So that's how the state gets its money out of amusement machines. And there are some organizations that are exempt from sales tax. State and local governments don't pay a tax. Obviously, it's right pocket, left pocket. It's coming out of one pocket and it's going to go into the other pocket. I'm involved with an organization, Vietnam Veterans, and we buy in Martin County. We worked out an arrangement between the VEA, the county, and also our organization, where we buy the buses that run back and forth to the VA hospital from Martin County. The county provides the drivers, and then the VA does the maintenance and the gas. The only reason I'm talking about this is that the county doesn't have to pay any sales tax. So when we have to replace a bus, what we do is we give the money to the county. The county then turns around and they'll go out and buy the bus. And so we avoid sales tax on, $5,000 worth of sales tax because the county is an exempt organization. And there are some nonprofits that have to qualify, and there's certain hoops that you have to go through. They are exempt from sales tax also. So, but there are a lot of exemptions. As I mentioned, there's a lot of lobbyists out there. There's about 130 exemptions, and there is if you go on the Department of Revenue website, you can click on it and they'll give you a list of the exemptions. We're going to come up with that shortly. One of them I talked about a little earlier, and it's the easiest one, I think, to point to, is the difference between prepared goods and groceries. Groceries, there's no tax on any groceries, but there are taxes on prepared items. And just as there are taxable items on dry goods, paper goods, cleaning products, and all other things along those lines. It makes sense if you look at it.
It's 7 o'clock.
Sorry, if you look at it from the standpoint that the things that you need to live are not taxed. Water is not taxed. If you go into if you go in and you buy a bottle of water at a service station when you're getting gas, you'll find that there is no tax on that bottle of water. However, if you buy a bottle of flavored water, it's taxed. And just the next time you're in, if you have a bent for flavored water, go and buy a bottle of it and then look at the receipt and you'll see the line item tax on it. The rationale being is you need water to live. You don't need flavored water to live. So as I mentioned, if you go onto the website of the Department of Revenue under My Florida, you can find this form, and it gives you a list of all of the grocery items and medical items that are non-taxable. It's kind of tough to read here, and you won't be able to read it, but it's there. There are some exempt, exempt transactions. The first one is interstate commerce. If you all have a business to where you're selling something outside the state, you don't have to collect a tax. Now, I want to caveat that because a few years ago, there was a decision, Wayfair versus North Dakota, and the Supreme Court turned around and said, you no longer, they obviated the principle of nexus. And nexus meant you had to have a business in that state in order, a physical presence in that state in order to collect the tax. The Supreme Court turned around and said, no, that's not the case anymore. So you may have to collect some tax, but we're going to hit that a little later. If you just give me a few minutes and we'll get to it. Items for resale, for the most part, are non-taxable. And so in other words, if in your business you are going out and you are buying something that you're going to sell to a third party, you don't have to pay the sales tax on that transaction, but you are obligated to collect the sales tax. And so those are some exceptions to it.
Hey Frank, this is Carol. Question for you, because I was just thinking about the one lady who was on, what was her name? Shakima, did she jump off?
No, she's on.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering, so if she received something in kind, and let's say she chose to sell it because, she was doing fundraising or anything, if she receives it as a donation and sells it, does she have to do anything with that?
Yeah, there's a transaction and she's obligated to collect the tax. This
Okay.
is, one of the most interesting businesses, and a little bit of a digression, is consignment shops. Okay. Because, or, a lot of, and I'm lumping this under a broad umbrella because there's a lot of churches and things along those lines that have a thrift store. Okay. Items are donated, they turn around and they sell them, and, and they should be collecting a sales tax on those items, even though the items are donated. Same thing with a consignment shop. Somebody puts it in the shop, you're taking a percentage of the sale and you're also collecting the sales tax. Now, normally the store is the remitter of the tax to the state, not the individual that put it in there on consignment. I guess it would be pretty tough for the state to track every individual, so they make the store responsible for that. Does that answer your question, Cheryl?
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just thinking about her situation. So yeah, thank you.
There's a couple of interesting anomalies. Installers, okay. If you are an installer and you're not a manufacturer, and you're installing something on permanent property or permanently installed on real property, you have to pay a sales tax on the material and the tools that you use. And the customer doesn't pay any tax. Give you an example. I had a company come out and install some screen doors on some patio doors. And the fellow said to me at the end of when I went to pay him, he said, he says, I'm just going to eat the tax. I'm not going to charge you the tax. I said, well, I really appreciate it because legally you can't charge me the tax. It's buried in your price. And he kind of looked at me and said, how do you know that? Anyway, he was installing something, permanently installing, because it was screwed in, nailed into the frame of the door and on real property, which is land or building or something along those lines. And so he had to pay sales tax on the items that he bought that he was going to install in the house. And he couldn't collect the tax from me. He had to build it into his price. Same thing if you have somebody come out and they're putting up say storm shutters that they didn't manufacture, but they bought from somebody else and they're putting on your house. it is being permanently installed on real property. And those are the two key principles behind that. And so as a result of that, they can't collect the tax, they have to pay the tax. Now, if it's not permanently installed on real property, an example of that would be, suppose you had somebody come out and they're putting up drapes. You already have the rods. So the drapes are not permanently installed because they can be taken down. And the customer would have to pay sales tax on the material and not necessarily the labor, unless they're on the same invoice. But they don't have to pay sales tax on the labor. I do business with a quirky mechanic. And I say quirky because Dave will not buy any parts. He'll order the parts. He'll use my credit card and have the parts delivered to his store. And so I pay the sales tax on the parts. Dave installs them, puts them on the car, but at the same time, then does not charge me any sales tax on his labor. And when I asked him one time, I said, it's kind of a strange way of doing business. He's the only guy I've ever run across that does business this way. He said, and he's a crusty old Floridian. He says, I just don't want to fool around with the Department of Revenue. I said, okay, Dave, I got it. So, anyway. Now, if something is being installed on not real property, but tangible property, you pay a sales tax on the material and the labor. Example is the radio. I was replacing a radio in one of our cars, and I went down to Best Buy, picked out a radio, had their Geek Squad install the radio. They charged me sales tax on the labor and also for the radio. And the reason for that was because it was not being installed on real property. And it wasn't permanently installed because that radio could come out of there. So just a kind of few quirks in Florida laws. Manufacturing, don't have anybody here, but the manufacturers who don't install, but yet they're selling it to a third party, they don't pay a sales tax on the materials that they're using. An example that we talked about earlier was if you have somebody that is installing hurricane shutters and they're buying them from some manufacturing company don't pay sales tax on the materials that they're using to make the shutters, but they collect the sales tax from the individual they're selling them to, and the manufacturer has to use their reseller certificate. If they're selling it to me, if I walk in as the end customer and say, I want to buy these shutters and I want to put them up myself, they will collect sales tax from me, the end user. Manufacturers who do install fall under a whole other category. They have to pay sales tax on the materials that they're purchasing, items that they use in the fabrication process, tools and equipment and machinery along those lines, labor that goes into that process, and it gets pretty cumbersome. So most of them will turn around and they'll say, well, roughly 70% of our labor dollars are going into manufacturing. The rest of it is used for setup, cleanup, and downtime that you would normally, get in a manufacturing system. If it's not permanently installed or it isn't on real property, then they have to collect the tax from the customer if it's the final user, but not from a reseller. So manufacturers have a whole different set of rules that they have to live by. Then we get into the repairs, right? If no materials are used, there's no sales tax. If it's off-site, you break down, you call AAA and say you have a dead battery. They come out and they've got a battery and they put a new one in your car. You're going to pay sales tax, not only on the battery, but you're going to pay sales tax on the labor involved also, because it's not real property and it's not permanently installed. If it's permanently installed on real property, then a repair pays sales tax on the material and the customer doesn't pay a sales tax. So say, for example, your water heater goes out, you have a plumber come in. Plumber turns around, he puts in a water heater, so it's permanently installed and it's on real property. The repairer, the plumber, at the time he buys the water heater, pays a sales tax on that, and he passes it on or builds it into his price and passes it on to you. Shipping, there's usually no sales tax on shipping. However, if it's the rule of thumb is if something is being delivered within a 50-mile radius, they don't normally charge a sales tax. So say, for example, you go to Bears Furniture and you buy some furniture and you have it delivered to your house. Bears is going to hit you 25 or 50 bucks to deliver it. However, they will not charge you sales tax on that. If you go down to a store down in Miami and you have them delivered and they've got to go further than 50 miles, they will normally charge you a sales tax on the delivery.
Well, excuse me, they'll charge you a sales tax on the furniture and on the delivery, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry. I wasn't clear on that, Diana, but the furniture in my mind is a given, you know. You used to be able to go up to High Point, North Carolina, buy your furniture up there, have them throw it in a moving van, bring it down to Florida, and you avoided sales tax altogether. But they've been clamping down on that old loophole. But so it's not there too much anymore. You get at the time you register with the Department of Revenue, you get a reseller certificate, and they issue these annually. When you come up for renewal, and this is what you have to provide to somebody if you want to, resell stuff. So if you go to Sam's Club or someplace like that, and you're buying items to be used in your business or to resell in your business, you would provide this with them, and they do the breakdown between the items that are taxable and non-taxable that you would have to pay. And you have to keep one of these on file with them. This just gives you an explanation of the annual resales or the certificate. It's items that are resold in your business operation or something that you're going to be a component of. So say my wife and I had a specialty meat products store at one time, and there would be other things that we would sell, cakes and stuff like that. So she would not pay a sales tax on the cake mix that was, or the flour that was going into the cake, but would charge the customer tax because it was a prepared food. Same thing with commercial rentals that we talked about earlier. That'll be substantially re-rented. That individual would need a reseller certificate.
Is there a cost to the certificate?
No, it's automatically issued to you. You should get it when you register with the DOR. All of your items for resale, you need to document and keep notes in terms of who you're selling to, and
it's 7:15.
Sorry about that. Who you're selling to, and if you have a reseller certificate that somebody is giving to you, you have to keep that on file. There's also a way that you get a transaction authorization. You do that electronically by going online with the Florida Department of Revenue. They have it. You can either do it by phone or you can do it on a mobile app. They make it real easy, or you can go online. Each year you have to get a new certificate or copy of a new certificate from the vendors you're doing business. And you can't use it for goods that you're going to use in the business itself for your personal purposes. It's only for items that are going to be resold. When you go on to the Department of Revenue and you want to verify somebody's reseller certificate, you pull up their website, this is what you're going to see. Down in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see more services and a red arrow. That's what you click on, and then that takes you to the portal where you can do the verification if you decide to use it online. We collect tax based on the sales price, okay? And so, as I mentioned, other than amusements, everything has to be line item. So in an example of tax on this transaction is $62.96 of goods were sold. And so $3.78 was due in tax, okay? And it's due at the time of sale. So at the time you make that sale, that money belongs to the state of Florida. And we'll get into when the filing is, but if you're late on letting them know, they're going to come looking for it. We'll talk a little bit about use tax. Cheryl had asked about this earlier in terms of what's a use tax. Well, a use tax is something that you bought outside the state of Florida, didn't pay sales tax on. You may have paid sales tax in another state, but you're using it in the state of Florida, and theoretically, you have to remit the sales tax to the state of Florida. Now, if the tax is more than the state of Florida, there's no amount to be remitted. However, you still have to file the paperwork. If the amount is less than the state of Florida, say the sales tax in another state's 4%, you owe the state of Florida the 2% difference. And how many people do this? And I read something that it's probably less than 3% of the population in the state of Florida pays the use tax. And I mean, if you stop and think about it, how is somebody going to turn around and track this down? Say you go up to, you're in another city in another state, and you decide that you want to buy a computer or you want to buy something for your home, you buy it, transaction is closed, you carry it on home. No one knows the difference. You're the only one that knows. So it's between your conscience and the state of Florida. Well, there's 97% of the people that don't have a conscience out there, and I'm probably one of them.
I have a question though, because if in your example about buying a computer out of state, wouldn't they charge me a sales tax? Because I wouldn't have a resale certificate from their state.
Correct. They will charge you sales tax, and you are going to pay sales tax in that state. But you're going to use it in the state of Florida. So if you paid 4% in that state and Florida is 6%, theoretically you owe the state of Florida the 2% difference.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of stuff that is shipped to the state of Florida through internet purchases or mail order purchases, right? And so my son has a friend here in town that has a business to where he sells to school districts all over the country, right? So he's shipping stuff out. There are people that are shipping things in, a lot of it, office supplies, business furniture. So tax is due when it's purchased, and it's unless it's for resale, no tax is due. But if you use it instead, you need to pay the tax on it. If the seller didn't separately state the tax, theoretically you have to pay the tax, or if it's less than what we talked about, the tax is due. So the exceptions to this is this is a whole different issue, but we're off the use tax. Tax rate is generally 6%. Counties have an option that they can bump the tax up to 1.5%, but it has to be passed by a referendum. And we'll show you some counties with the numbers in it. As I mentioned, amusement machines, it's $30 a machine and 4%. And then electricity has a different tax rate too. The electricity sales tax rate is 6.95%. And then you have, there's also a local option for transient rentals, and there's also the local option for tangible goods. So in the state of Florida, we use a bracket system, and the bracket system, is a number that is applied to each part of the transaction. I'm going to jump 2 slides ahead. So, for example, if an item is between 10 cents and 16 cents, you collect a penny. If it's between 67 and 83 cents, 5 cents. And if it's between 84 and $1.09, 6%. If you were to add all of these items up, in effect, say you sold 11 items or 10 items at $1.10 a piece, there would be 70 cents tax collected. So you're actually paying a 6.34%. That's why all the transactions are line item. However, you can lump goods if there's a number of goods in a single transaction, they get lumped together. So you go into the grocery store and you buy some cleaning supplies, you buy some tissues, you buy light bulbs, whatever else you pick up in there other than food. And it all comes to $10. You're going to pay 6% on that $10 item. If you were to go in and out of that store and buy all of those items individually, 10 different transactions, you would actually pay 6.3% tax because of the bracket system that the state of Florida has. The discretionary sales surtax, as I mentioned, is each county is allowed to bump up to 1.5%. And you're obligated to collect this from somebody outside of the county that you're doing business in. And however, the state takes care of sending the money back to the adjacent county. So if you're in Palm Beach County, you're down in Boca Raton, and you're doing business with somebody in Northern Broward County, and you're collecting sales tax from them, you're going to collect the Broward County sales tax rate. If you're in, you're up in Palm Beach Gardens, and you're doing business with somebody in Southern Martin County, you're going to collect the sales tax rate on Southern Martin County. You're going to report it all to the state. And there's a spot on the form that says, how much of this was, taxable event, how much was discretionary versus the 6%. And then the state worries about divvying it up among the different counties. I don't know what the formula is. Somewhere along the line, somebody came up with an algorithm in Tallahassee. They probably use somebody from FSU that has a math department that's probably pretty decent. If you look at the sales tax rate, okay, Broward has a 1% override, Glades 1%, Indian River 1%, Palm Beach 1%, Martin we're at 0.5%. And when these local sales tax options get passed, they have to have an effective date and an expiration date, so they're not ad infinitum. So for instance, when we voted on our exception here in Martin County, it was for a 5-year period of time. And the county commissioners had to be pretty specific as to what they were going to use the money for. The first time they tried to float, their most recent tax, it lost by 56 votes because they were not specific enough. And the taxpayers said, hey, we're not just giving you more money. We want to know what it's for, and we want to make sure that it's used exactly for those purposes. There is also a discretionary sales surtax on a single item that's more than $5,000. It has to be a single item and usually bulk, and it is a working unit. So when I say working unit, give you an example. An air conditioning system has several components. It has an air handler, it has the heat exchanger. That is considered to be a working unit. And so if that comes to in excess of $5,000, there's a cap. they're only going to charge you 6% on the first $5,000. It doesn't apply to rentals because they can exceed that amount. And it doesn't, apply to services or service warranties. Filing requirements. The state wants its money by the 20th of the month and or the last business day prior to the 20th, if it's an electronic payment. If the 20th falls on a weekend, you've got to have the money into them the first business day. So it's Monday morning, unless that's a holiday, and then it's Tuesday morning. And if you go on the Department of Revenue's website, they give you there's a calendar page, and they'll tell you exactly when everything is due. And if you're not there with it, they're there to turn around and to fine you in some way, shape, or form. Although that isn't always the case. Usually if it's a mistake, they'll give you a buy the first time. This is a form that is normally filled out for sales and use tax. And you'll see there's gross sales up here, which is, say you're selling $100 worth of stuff. Exempt sales, $30 of it is, exempt and not due taxes because somebody has a reseller certificate and you're selling to them. And so the taxable amount, say, is $70. And then it's 70 times the 6%, the $3.20 would go in this box. Down here, and you gotta bear with me because my eyes aren't as good. The discretionary sales tax. So line 15C, amounts subject to surtax at a rate different than your county system surtax. So that everything you collected over the 6% on people that you sold to in other counties gets filled out on that line item. And as I said, the state will then figure out a way of divvying that out to the different counties you're dealing with. Filing requirements. If you're collecting more than $1,000 in sales tax annually, you have to file monthly. If you're doing $100 or $100 less than $100 a year, you only have to file annually. I had a SCORE client who was a photographer, part-time, did home portraits and things along those lines. There is no sales tax on the service, and particularly if the items were delivered electronically. She would email the pictures to the family. They did the printing and all that kind of stuff. So the amount of sales tax she collected was small. Every now and then somebody would want an album. And if she put an album together, she was obligated to charge taxes, not just on the album itself, but also on her labor. And so we were able to work this out that initially she only had to file annually. And then, they looked at it. And if she stayed under that $100 threshold, that was it, one annual filing. I think I mentioned this. I had a aircraft leasing business one time and had a
It's
plane.
7:30.
Had a plane, and I put it into. My wife told me, said, if you buy a plane, you've got to lease it out because you're not going to fly it all the time. So I did, and the aircraft leasing company collected the tax. I didn't have to worry about it. However, I never filed with the state any of the forms. About 5 years after I folded that business, I got a call from my mother who told me, and she said, some guys from the Department of Revenue are around here looking for you. And so we finally met and, they told me that I showed them the books and the records and that the taxes had been paid by the leasing company. And so they said, okay, but you could be fined for not filing the paperwork. So they slapped me on the hand and we went our merry way. Filing is made really easily. You can either telefile it, and there's the phone number that you use for telefiling. You can mail it in, or you can, you can tell, or you can file it electronically on the website. Every business has to register, even if you don't think you're going to collect sales tax. And you go to the website for the Department of Revenue. You hit their webpage and you'll see pretty prominently register to collect and report tax items. If you click on that box, it'll take you to the next portal where you'll answer a number of questions. And is this a new business entity? Is it an existing business? Or you're adding a new location? You go through and you fill that out. And ultimately what you end up with is a certificate of registration. And you go through about 3 screens. They're not onerous. It's pretty easy. And this has to be displayed in your business if you have a physical location. If you don't have a physical location, you just got to keep it in your files somewhere. And so let's just quickly about Wayfair. Doesn't really impact anybody here, but what happened was in 2018, as I mentioned, the Supreme Court ruled that Nexus was gone, and that you could, if you were selling to somebody outside of the marketplace or your state, you could, or somebody was selling to people inside your state. In this case, Wayfair was selling to the folks in South Dakota. They were obligated to collect sales tax and remit it to the state of South Dakota. Why? Well, you know, there's roughly between $538, $578 billion worth of internet sales. And that's a lot of money for any government to like slip by. So where we're going with this is now online retailers are going to have to collect sales tax on out-of-state customers. A lot of states have picked up on this. Congress, or not Congress, Congress supposedly said they were going to come out on a national type of an arrangement to make it easier on everybody. They haven't done anything. So the state of Florida recently, in July of this last year, 2021, Senate Bill 50 went in the state that said out-of-state online retailers are obligated to collect sales tax from folks in the state of Florida. Now, this is not a big deal for the Amazons and the eBays of the world, but it is a big deal for the small retailers. And so what they ended up doing was that in the state of Florida, they said anybody who makes does more than $100,000 worth of sales in the state or over 200 transactions have to collect tax. Anybody underneath that threshold do not have to collect tax in the state of Florida. And a lot of other states have fallen into the same boat. There are still 5 states that don't require any taxes to be collected. New Hampshire is one of them, Delaware, Montana, Alaska, and Oregon. So there's a dollar threshold in the other 45 states that are out there, or a transaction threshold. And so if you're doing internet sales, you need to research each state's law to see, you know, how you're faring. If you're pushing up on a transaction threshold, I would say of more than 100 transactions or more than $100,000 worth of sales into a particular state. And you could probably talk to your tax attorney on those lines and get some questions answered, or some guidance, I should say. That's pretty much it. The last one is that the DOR is, and I found the folks to be pretty helpful. They're not there to, you know, I don't know, they're not there to give you a hard time. They just want the money collected, and they're there to assist you in collecting the money. Even the gentleman that came out and see me about my aircraft leasing business were pretty kind about it, you know, and just pointed out the fact that, you know, after I told them I was a dummy, didn't know anything about taxes, they believed me. few minutes of conversation convinced them. And anyway, they let me go. In our area up in Fort Pierce, there is an office, and you can walk into the office. There's 3 people that staff it. They're happy to answer any questions that you have, or you can turn around and call them up in Tallahassee, or you can email them. I emailed them one time. I had a gentleman out in Okeechobee that was a fishing guide. And at that time, he had a question. He was buying a new bass boat, a lot of money, wanted to know about taxes paid on the bass boat and whether it was exempt from it. They were very good at answering the questions. And they don't hit it in a punitive fashion. Any other questions? No? Well, as I told Takeda earlier before we started this, I said the sales tax is a subject that's kind of like watching paint dry. It's just not very exciting. But anyway, I appreciate you all being here this evening, and thank you very much for your time and taking time out of your evening.
Thank you so much, Frank. It was an excellent overview. This is the second time I've seen it, and I've learned something new each time. So I really appreciate your diligence. So Takeda, do you have anything else you want to say to everyone?
Don't just thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Frank, for that very thorough presentation. I actually learned a lot, and I hope that all of our participants also were able to glean a lot of really useful information. So
Oh, wait a minute. We have one question yet. They're coming in on the chat box. Diana, can I ask about volunteering? Diana?
Sorry, I sent that to you directly so that we don't have to waste everyone's time with my question. But it was about volunteering with SCORE.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
We'll take that offline. Takeda, just make sure that I get Diana's last name. And yes, I will give you a ring and we'll talk. It's a fabulous organization. Having a blast.
Yes, and there's a very active chapter in Boca Raton.
Oh, good.
You know.
Yeah. Although Treasure Coast is better. We'd rather have you. You know,
I don't disagree with you. I agree that, you know.
That's a very far drive, so I don't know. Maybe one day.
we're doing everything virtually, Diana.
Yeah,
So a
we
lot
do
of the
everything
programs,
virtually.
it doesn't matter where you're located.
Yeah, we're way more fun up here. We're way more fun.
Well,
All right.
thank you very much again, the Women's